Welcome to this Innovation Fund recording. My name is Laura Pereira, and in this presentation, I will explain how the GHG methodology applies to mobility projects. I will also highlight important aspects of the methodology that applicants should have in mind when completing their calculations. The mobility category includes projects in three sectors: aviation, maritime, and road transport. This category allows for applications of two types of projects: those related to a reduction in emissions for the delivery of transportation services, like transportation of goods or transportation of passengers, and also projects that intend to manufacture innovative aircraft, vessels, or road vehicles, or even an important component to be used in those. The methodology itself is suited for reductions in the use of these modes of transportation, which are the journeys themselves. And there are a number of projects that could have this purpose, such as proposals for radical design change that improve the aerodynamic in planes, reducing weight and as a result reducing consumption significantly, or fuel switch projects such as shifting to sustainable biofuels or blends, switching to electricity, hydrogen, or another low carbon fuel. And in this slide I list a couple of examples, but the reality is that any innovative project that can demonstrate reductions not only of greenhouse gas emissions, but in the overall climate impact of the sector could apply this methodology. This because for the mobility sector, we go beyond the conventional greenhouse gases and look also into opportunities that contribute to reducing the additional non-CO2 climate impacts from aviation and maritime. I'll come back to this later. In real life, we would hardly find two projects that are exactly the same, even within the same category. This because infrastructure may differ based on site and also availability of fuels in the region, etc. So if we were to leave applicants to report all greenhouse gas sources pertinent for their project, we would expect a huge variety of sources. So for the sake of simplification and to ensure comparability, we have preset which emission sources all mobility projects should include in the reference and project scenarios, and which ones could be omitted. So in both scenarios, applicants shall report the use of energy in the journeys, whether by air, water, or road transportation. The difference is that in the reference scenario, we assume the energy to be the conventional energy type, whereas in the project scenario, applicants shall detail their alternative to the conventional energy use to deliver the same volume of service, which could be delivered by the same or by a different mode of transportation, or even by a combination of different modes of transportation. So if the project involves the use of low carbon fuels or electricity, these shall be reported, including any remaining consumption of conventional fossil fuel if that's the case. Then, if there are maritime and road transport journeys in either the reference or project scenario, then such applicants shall quantify and declare fugitive emissions of fuel gases in these journeys. Similarly, if the project includes maritime and air transportation journeys in either reference or project scenarios, then the applicant shall quantify and report additional non-CO2 climate impacts. And finally, maritime and aviation projects that envisage significant reductions in supporting infrastructure, like in the airports or ports, they may opt to include these sources within the boundaries of the quantification. This is not applied for road transportation infrastructure. One last point I want to mention here is that for the sake of simplification for small-scale projects, applicants will be allowed to omit the reporting of selected emission sources, and I'll come to this later. Deep diving into the reference scenario, I just want to highlight some important points to have in mind. In terms of modes of transportation, the applicant shall adopt the same mode proposed under the project scenario. So if project scenario is road transportation, then they should also assume that it's replacing a road transportation. This except for situations where the project consists in a modal shift. So intentionally will replace the type of modal. One thing is crucial that when estimating the emissions that would be released by the conventional transportation technology, applicants consider the delivery of the same volume of services predicted to be delivered by the innovative project. So if the project anticipates serving 100,000 person kilometers per year, the same figures shall be adopted in the reference scenario. With regards to type of fuel, it is assumed that without the project, the journeys would be delivered using jet kerosene type A1 for any air transportation, maritime diesel oil for any water transportation, and for all road journeys, diesel B0 shall be used, which means diesel with a 0% biodiesel share in its composition. So if your proposal it is for a road transport project and in real life you're using gasoline and not diesel, you shall stick to the preset fuel type established by the methodology. Opting to choose a different emission factor to match your real life circumstance may weaken your proposal. Finally, with regards to fuel consumption, for manufacturing projects, applicants shall adopt the default values for the specific fuel consumption. And fuel consumption would be the fuel use per functional unit for the different values, for the different vehicles that are presented in the methodology, or estimate those based on the reference we provide in the methodology. So here we try to illustrate the methodology in a visual way. The first parameter of the equation refers to the energy use in the journeys. So in the reference scenario, again, applicants have to multiply the energy use in the relevant journeys by the emission factor for the conventional fuels. And these shall be done for each and every mode of transportation and added up. Then in the project scenario, applicants will tailor for their alternative fuel and modes of transportation proposed in the project as a replacement of the common practice. The methodology accommodates for projects using a broad variety of fuels and energy sources, including renewables, electricity, and hydrogen. In the case of blends of fuel, like some sustainable aviation fuels, applicants will have to break down the share of each type of fuel in the blend to apply the adequate emission factor. Our second parameter refers to the fugitive emissions of fuel gases, such as methane, slips, and liquefied natural gas ships. These releases in both scenarios shall be quantified and demonstrated by the applicants using the assumption or relevant measure methods, and then shall be multiplied by the appropriate global warming potential of each gas. With respect to additional non-CO2 climate impacts, the methodology for mobility project considers the warming impact associated with black carbon emissions from maritime transport and other non-CO2 climate impacts from aviation, such as emissions of water vapor, formation of condensation trails, also called contrails, and cloudiness in the wake of aircraft, NOx, soot particles, and oxidized sulfur species. To estimate such emissions, we have different approaches. For maritime, for the moment, the methodology is limited to the emissions from black carbon, which are normally tied to the use of heavy fuel. So to estimate such emissions, applicants shall estimate the release of black carbon into the atmosphere and multiply by the GWP global warming potential of 900 tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of black carbon provided in methodology. Whereas for aviation, the approach is a bit more complex. So for the reference scenario, the additional non-CO2 climate impacts is assumed to be equal to 2 times the CO2 emissions from jet A1 fuel combustion, corresponding to an overall climate impact equal to 3 times the radiative forcing from the CO2 alone. So this approach is aligned with the 2 to 4 range of overall radiative forcing from aviation, which has been identified by the IPCC. So as we understand, projects will have rather a unique nature. For the project scenario, we do not provide any factors or a predefined methodology. Instead, applicants shall calculate this term using a well-justified approach based on scientific literature or by modeling global near-surface temperature change. Applicants may opt to deviate from these approaches if and only if data monitored according to the MRV framework for the additional non-CO2 climate impacts from aviation is available at the time of the application. The fourth parameter, emissions from infrastructure, is not deemed mandatory. Only applicants that anticipate significant savings may wish to include such emissions in their calculations. And should that be the case, then the use of electricity, heat, and fuels in the infrastructure that support the operation of the air and water journeys shall be quantified for both reference and project scenarios. Then for a manufacturing project, it is assumed that emission reductions occur in the use of the innovative technology manufactured. And for this reason, any emissions that occur at the facility manufacturing the aircraft, vessel, or vehicle or a component, they shall be disregarded. So with the focus being on the use, the emission sources are mostly the same as those included for transportation services projects, except for the emissions from infrastructure that shall not be included in this case. The main difference is that for the calculations, instead of the gross emissions, the forecasted energy use in both scenarios and the fugitives should be reported on a unitary basis, meaning per unit of component that will be produced. Note that, again, with the focus being on the use of the technology, this implies that applicants will have to forecast fuel use in journeys that will be carried out by vehicles, aircraft, and vessels that are not in the market yet. So please make sure that you document any quantitative and qualitative assumptions that you adopt to forecast this consumption. So once you have the specific consumption or specific emissions defined, then the applicant will multiply these figures by the number of components produced each year, by the applicable use period of the component, which shall not exceed 5 years, and by the average distance traveled by the relevant mode of transportation. And of course, if the project does not intend to manufacture the entire aircraft, vessel, or vehicle, but rather a key component, then the calculation shall also be prorated based on the cost of this component as a share of the total production cost of the relevant consumer product. I hope you find this recording useful. We recommend you to read the Innovation Fund GHG methodology, consult the example, and watch the tutorials that will be made available. And if after consulting this resource you still have questions, please do not hesitate to submit a question via the dedicated help desk. And please note that the help desk can only answer questions related to the methodology or the utilization of the tool. Our team will not review calculations or validate assumptions that you intend to use for your project. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.